Good afternoon, everybody. My name's David Clark. I'm the Technical Director at the Railway Industry Association, the trade association for the railway supply industry. And it's our pleasure this afternoon to be hosting this speed workshop. This is a follow-on from the conference that we held in February, on the 26th of February, and I'll shortly put the link to that recording in the chat so that you can refer to that at your leisure if you didn't attend that conference. So this is intended to be the first of a number of workshops exploring in more detail the individual work streams behind Project Speed. So today we're going to cover the first three work streams. We've got pace, which Mike Wright will be speaking to. We've got standards and we've got timetabling. This has been a really popular webinar, and we're really pleased that we've got 600 people registered for it, which is fantastic. It's very timely, given that today was the launch of the Williams report, which calls for many of the things that speed is about, essentially doing things better, quicker, faster. So given that it's been really popular, we're not able to do a workshop in the traditional sense, sadly. With 600 people, that might be a little bit impractical. But we'll aim to make it as interactive as possible, and there'll be live polls during some of the presentations, notably those from Tom and Toby later, and we'd encourage you to ask Q&A, and each of the presenters will roughly speak for half the time, roughly 30 minutes, and then that gives us 30 minutes for Q&A. So please use the Q&A function in to ask your questions. And also, if you see a question that you like, then use the like function to really highlight it to us, because frankly, I will tend towards asking the questions that have got the most likes. So please don't hesitate to do that. Each of the presentation slots will be roughly an hour long. As I said, half an hour presentation and half an hour Q&A. That gives us 20 minutes between each of the events. We'll keep the team event going, but so you don't need to dial out and dial back in. You can just come back to it after you've had your cup of tea when the event starts. It starts again with the following speaker. So can I just say thank you to you for joining today, and don't hesitate to get engaged and ask lots of questions. So first up, I want to introduce Sue Millington, who is Head of Programme Management at the Rail Investment Centre of Excellence at Network Rail. And Sue is, in that role, is closely involved with all the detail of speed. And I've asked Sue to just give us a little reminder of the aims and objectives of the speed initiatives. So can I hand over to you, Sue?
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everyone. As David said, I am head of programme management working for Network Rail, but for speed, I'm the senior programme management for speed. And I do thank you for your time today. I do appreciate how precious that is. So as David said, today's about following up on the DFT and Network Rail industry-wide conference we held earlier in February this year. We're looking today to do a deeper dive into the thematic projects developed as a result of reviewing our processes in helping to deliver successful projects more efficiently. So I wanted to just give a quick overview before we went into that about what speed is and why we're making these changes to our tried and tested processes. So speed, the swift, pragmatic, efficient enhancement delivery, is a cultural revolution across the whole of the rail industry. And for those who are not aware, this is a joint initiative and an ambition to halve the time and the cost of project delivery. It's part of a number 10 directive to build Britain better, where the construction industry, not just rail, is challenged to deliver more efficiently in order to rebuild the strength of the economy, using our funds more effectively. So this is something the whole industry needs to get behind in order for us to collectively realise the ambition of speed. So it's a revolution has been born out of recognition that the economy is under unprecedented pressures. And this approach presents an opportunity to drive efficiency and transform the way that we deliver our projects in the rail industry. We can't continue to operate in the same way. Success delivers many benefits, including stimulating the economy through the investment in infrastructure, early release of passenger benefits as we reduce the delivery timescales. We'll also provide greater value for taxpayers with more benefits delivered for every pound invested in rail, and also remove barriers that have long hindered the industry transformation. This revolution will help secure the long-term viability of rail as an attractive investment opportunity in these tough economic climate. We started this initiative back in June 2020 with a special project team established to review opportunities and address the efficiency challenges. And this resulted in us identifying 6 projects, from which 10 themes were identified. These themes were where the business saw the greatest waste and where we felt the processes could be slicker, saving both time and money. Since that time, we have put 28 enhancement projects through this process, making significant savings of approximately 46% off our schedules and 24% off our costs. So you can see that the value to the railway is quite significant. Today we're taking a closer look at 3 of these themes. Pace with Mike Wright, which is the programme management framework which replaces GRIP. Standards with Tom Chapman, where we seek to simplify the process for standards, challenges and seek opportunities by doing so. And timetabling with Toby Patrick Bailey, where we see earlier and closer collaboration with train operators. I hope today offers inspiration for us all to think innovatively and challenge our working practices and our mindsets. Network Rail and DFT are doing this by embedding speed. Please reflect what each of you can do personally and within our organisations to take these principles further. This can be engaging with projects and suggesting more efficient solutions, challenging standards to achieve greater value, challenging our behaviours which do not benefit the railway and our collective ambitions. So I'd love to hear your ideas on those. We cannot continue to run the railway in the same way. We all need to adapt, not only to assure the success of the railway, but also to support the country's economic recovery. And let me be clear, this is not about assigning blame. The railways serve the country well, but over time we have continuously built in the what-if measures, tried to cover every angle. In so doing, we have overcomplicated, timely and costly processes. We're not looking to cut corners. We are looking to review what needs to be achieved and map out a plan to achieve these things using our knowledge and experience, not hiding behind processes and standards. Speed asks us to question the legitimacy of old practices and beliefs, to call out conflicts between leadership, process and procedure, which loses a consensus between teams and discourages the use of best practice and innovative practices. Speed's not an isolated initiative, it's interlinked with a number of government projects and goals to work collectively as an industry to update policies and drives initiatives to improve productivity and efficiencies in delivering rail infrastructure. It's been designed to empower us all in the industry to be revolutionary in our thinking and to challenge ourselves and each other to do better. But this takes us away from a world where we feel secure within the confines of a known sequential process. And we're replacing that with a more flexible approach, which will give us better outcomes. It's recognised that this may make people feel anxious and uncomfortable, but if we all focus on getting the right outcomes for our passengers, we focus on doing the right things and value add things that really matter, but doing that safely. And we all need to be part of that solution. So if you think we're doing something or building something which we don't need to achieve, we don't need to build to achieve the outcome, then challenge us, share the solutions. And if you'd like to discuss any of these ideas with us and all the ambitions, we'd love to hear from you. So with the right mindset and tools, we can collectively drive this change and deliver a dependable and efficient railway. So I think that's enough from me. I'll hand back to David to facilitate the rest of the day, but I hope you enjoy it and we'd love to hear from you and your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue, for that introduction. So, you know, a reminder, this is about challenging waste and unnecessary process. It's many of you will have experience of other sectors and other businesses, and you'll be able to compare and contrast what we do currently in the railway compared to what you've seen elsewhere. And I'm sure some of you'll see some opportunities for the rail industry to do better. So the opportunity here with speed is to bring those to attention and challenge the existing paradigm. The prize potentially is more work, more projects, more activity, more railway for the government's pound. And frankly, as an industry, I've heard it said we're on the naughty step as far as the government is concerned in terms of their trust in our ability to deliver. Now, that's not saying any of us don't work really, really hard to try and deliver successfully. Of course we do. But as an industry, the government see us as expensive. So speed is all about seeing us as an efficient industry, and we've certainly got better at that over CP6. Helping the industry see us as an efficient industry so that they trust us to spend the taxpayers' money, and we can help them build that better and build a better railway. So that's what I see this has all been about. If I can turn now to our first speaker, Mike Wright, who's already delivered a PACE presentation today to our friends and colleagues in the Rail Forum Midlands. So welcome to RIA this afternoon, Mike. We're really pleased to have you here. And you're going to talk about the successor to GRIP, which is going to speed up all of those preparatory, important and essential, but sometimes long-winded preparatory processes. So Mike is the Programme Management Director at Network Rail and has been instrumental in the development of PACE. If I can hand over to you, Mike, we're ready to learn about PACE. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I assume my slides will come on screen, because I don't think I can see them, can I, on presenter mode? So firstly, thank you, David and Sue, for introducing me and introducing the work we're doing on speed. As Dave said, my name is Mike Wright, Capital Investment Programme Director at Network Rail, accountable for our sponsorship and programme management capability across the business. And in some way, shape or form, in various roles for the best part of the last decade, I've been accountable, responsible, or indeed to blame, amongst the nicer words, for things such as GRIP, our project management framework, and our ways of working around how we deliver projects and programmes effectively. Going to start with a little bit of strategic context, which will pick on some of what Sue has said, some of what you may have heard from other speed briefings previously, but really important to set the context of why PACE was important and why we needed to move away from GRIP. So as Sue mentioned, we received a very real challenge from the UK government last summer to look at how we can deliver better. Better could mean a number of things. It's faster, it's cheaper, it might be safer, it might be improved outcomes to our customers. But to look at those things, understand where the challenges are, and what we need to overcome to achieve better outcomes for all our customers, whether that be the travelling public, our freight users, the taxpayer, major funders, so on and so forth. To do that, Network Rail established Project Speed, and Rob McIntosh, our regional director for Eastern, has led the charge on that on behalf of Network Rail's board. What Rob's done with his team, with the support of people like Sue and others from within the business, is look at how do we identify the blockers to doing things better and how do we overcome them. To identify those blockers, they set a very real challenge to be better to a number of our projects and programmes in the portfolio. They were given a very blunt challenge to go away, look at their baseline cost plans, their schedules, and identify opportunities to not just reduce the time and cost, but to halve the time and slash the cost. A very deliberate use of words. This wasn't about simply looking for small efficiencies, but being revolutionary in our challenge and revolutionary in how we respond to that. Each of those projects has been reporting up through our senior leadership into people like Andrew Haynes and members of our non-executive committee, DFT directors, identifying the opportunities on their projects in their specific context, and equally what things are stopping them doing more. And that's really led into the second part of Speed, the what stops us doing more, the blockers. A number of things have been identified out of that, and what the Speed team has done is consolidated those and launched them into a number of what they've called themes. In simple language, the themes are the major change projects and initiatives we need to undertake to achieve better. And it's not just looking internally at Network Rail, we're looking absolutely at our own governance and process, which we're going to talk about now around the move away from grip to pace. We're also looking at how we're regulated and indeed legislation as well. This is a real challenge, not just to Network Rail, not just to our supply chain, but to the whole industry, how we're governed and the legislative frameworks we work within. So I got involved with this around about September time last year. Project Speed, having listened to a number of those initial projects around what the challenges were, there was a very simple request to initially look at how we could make grip more flexible. Grip for our complex projects, our lock ones and lock twos as we call them, is a very sequential life cycle. You have to follow the stages in the life cycle sequentially. You can't overlap them on a complex project. You take a number of stop points, in fact 8 for each grip stage throughout the life cycle to review, and it takes a lot of time because you're managing scope, risk and uncertainty with a lot of governance to move through that life cycle. So what they wanted was the ability to start overlapping that work, do things differently. Simply, if we can overlap work, we can get a faster outcome. So that was the request around about September time. We went away, looked at that, and what was evidently clear was that that really is the tip of the iceberg. If we actually wanted to do things radically different, it wasn't just about doing the same work but faster. It was about creating a framework where we could foster innovation, foster freedom of thought, not just within our own internal teams, but with the supply chain. Look at not following the paint by numbers processes that GRIP and the supporting standards have mandated for years, but really give opportunity to individuals and organisations with often decades of experience to introduce new ways of working into projects, programmes, portfolios, the wider Network Rail framework to help us do something better. By November, that became a request to actually replace GRIP. We'd looked at the initial request, we'd looked at what else we needed to do, and in consultation with our board, we determined the right thing to do was replace GRIP in its entirety, and that's what we're going to talk to now over the next 20 minutes or so. It was a rapid development piece of work, so we started in November, published version 1 on the 4th of January, and we're now looking at how we mature that over the coming year. There's another 4 tranches of work we've got planned to deliver this calendar year, and increasingly as we get into the detail of those, we'll be seeking more engagement and input from people like yourselves, our supply chain partners, as well as our industry partners at funding level as well. So the slide I've got up on screen, just talk to a couple of key points on there before we move in and get into the meat of the presentation. 2 key outcomes within that strategic context we wanted to achieve in version 1 of PACE, and the first of those is around the development stages of the project life cycle. GRIP 1, 2 and 3 traditionally, where we look at a client requirement, we develop multiple options up to a level of design through GRIP 2 and GRIP 3 that will meet that requirement, and end of GRIP 3, based on a level of certainty from that engineering design, we'll down select to a single option. Something I've seen certainly in the years I've been working in national roles in Network Rail, independent from the projects. I'll often spend time with projects in GRIP 3 that you look at and say, actually, why are we developing some of those options through a level of design, putting a lot of time, effort, cost into developing an option? Actually, sometimes common sense, or surely an easier way of discounting it, would have been more appropriate. So we want to bring that into PACE, and I'll pull that out in the case studies I use towards the end of this presentation about what that may look like. The other piece for version 1 in terms of an outcome is we've called it delegated authority of decision making here. And this is on the premise that in today's governance framework, people like myself who own national standards, so it's GRIP for me, if a project wants to do something different that is contradictory, non-compliant with GRIP, they have to come to me as a single point of expertise. You have to assume I know everything about Network Rail and our whole project's portfolio, and I'll help that project do something differently, sign off a variation or a derogation to the standard, and enable them to follow a different way of working. That works on a really big assumption that Mike is the best person to make that call on every project, and I think that's fundamentally wrong assumption. The people who know best about our projects are the people closest to them, the project managers, the accountable engineers, the sponsors, our supply chain partners. And as we move forward and deploy PACE across the business, as we mature the framework and challenge other processes that are associated with it, we're looking to move much more decision making away from the national centres, people like myself and Sue, and much closer down to the projects. So already, and you're going to hear from Tom Chapman later around the work he's doing on standards challenge, a fantastic piece of work in that area is all looking about where we can delegate mine and Sue's authority to vary from ways of working down into the regions, and ultimately that will be down to individual sponsors and project managers. So all that said, what does it mean? What does it look and feel like? So I'm going to take you through a few slides now of what PACE actually does look and feel like. What are the tangible differences to GRIP? I'm then going to look at some application examples. We'll use 2 case studies. One of those is external to our industry, but draws out some really important points around how we think about project management. And the last one I'll finish on is an internal example of a live project I'm working with at the moment. Hopefully, my slides aren't progressing on my screen. Hopefully that's gone to the second slide for you now. So what does PACE look and feel like? Why is it different to GRIP at face value? Well, the first difference is the life cycle itself. GRIP was an 8-stage sequential project management life cycle, a traditional waterfall life cycle, and PACE is a smaller life cycle. It's got the 4 phases that you see in the white boxes on the slide on screen now. To support that move, we did some independent benchmarking led by KPMG, and they went off and looked at 8 or 9 industry and outside industry comparators across the globe. They looked at people such as the nuclear industry, Transport New South Wales, who are a global leader in some of this, highways, UK Power Networks and others. And the key question there was, what's the mandatory governance that the business imparts on projects? How many control points does the business require in those industries to effectively manage the project risk? The simple theory is the more life cycle stages you have, and therefore mandatory review points, the more protective of risk you're being, the more risk adverse you're being, you're managing that critically closer. The offside of that is the trade-off even is that you often spend more time in the project life cycle because of the increased governance. So something that benchmarking told us was, look, 8 stages is absolutely mad. None of the comparators have a life cycle that requires 8 formal stages to move through. Where we settled, which was where most of the comparators are, is the 4 phases you'll see in PACE on screen now. So the first phase of PACE consolidates what used to be GRIP 1, 2 and 3. So that's all around the client requirement, the financial commercial feasibility of that in GRIP 2, and down selection to a single project option in GRIP 3. That goes into a single phase in PACE, which is called strategic development and project selection. GRIP 4 and 5. GRIP 4 is all about baselining your design standards, achieving what we call approval in principle before taking that forward in GRIP 5 to a ready for construction design. That moves into a single phase in PACE called project design. GRIP 6, which is delivery, entry into service, commissioning, moves into project delivery. It's a one-to-one relationship. And GRIP 7 and GRIP 8. GRIP 7 is all about project closeout and hand back to the sponsor. GRIP 8 is the sponsor closing out on behalf of the business, transfer of warranties to the operator maintainer, for example, close out financial and commercials. Both of those map into the closeout phase of PACE. Part of the value of doing this we'll see as we move through later slides, but it is about creating more flexibility about how you plan and schedule work between key control points. By having less control points, we give more authority to the sponsors and their project teams to look at how best to move between point A and point B in the life cycle. What we don't want to do, saying all that, is throw the baby out with the bathwater. So although the governance that surrounded GRIP was excessive, GRIP still asked some very important questions that projects need to answer throughout their life cycle. So we don't have 8 formal stages that you must follow sequentially in PACE, but we do have 8 milestones, which are questions or outcomes that projects will look to achieve. I'm not going to run through all of these, conscious of time, but if we talk to the first phase of PACE, it's really important in that first phase that they still understand the client requirement, understand the feasibility of delivering something to meet that client requirement, and that we've got an option identified that we can design, deliver and enter into operational service to do so. The benefit of making these things milestones rather than formal GRIP stages is there'll be much less, in fact currently no governance around the order, sequentiality or indeed how they must be delivered on any individual project. So as GRIP said, you must do those things in order and you must bound them separately in your plans as discrete activity. Under PACE, you could deliver them in order sequentially, you could overlap them, you could run them completely in parallel. You could, if you wanted, and I'm not suggesting it's the right thing, run them in reverse order and do an option selection and feasibility study before you've even asked the client what their requirement is. That last example is not the right thing to do, but it is about giving the sponsor and their teams the flexibility to look at what is the right way for their project, to look at the specific context they're operating in, the constraints of the environment they're delivering within, and apply the most appropriate use of the framework. Another variation of PACE we're looking at, and this is something we've not done in Network Rail before, but it's some learning from other industries that we got from the benchmarking, particularly done well within Transport New South Wales and also the nuclear industry. And it's the concept of a single option project. In today's GRIP language, it's the life cycle without GRIP 1, 2 and 3. It's without the optioneering end of the process. In PACE, it's removal of that first phase of the PACE life cycle. Currently looking at where we can make best and most effective use of this and do so without increasing risk to those projects that aren't going to go through an optioneering process. It certainly will be very applicable to a lot of our renewals portfolio, especially where we're deploying into things like signalling, often common technology, but just within specifically different geographical contexts and site contexts. By that we mean we're not just going to not do any development and go jump straight into delivery of something, but it means where's the right place to do development. A portfolio manager with a signalling portfolio today may have 40 or 50 projects they're going to deliver in any given year. Under GRIP, they'd have taken each of those projects individually through GRIP 1, 2 and 3, looked at the requirement, looked at the feasibility and looked at the options. Under PACE, we say, look, actually doing that 50 times on 50 projects is not the right thing to do. If we escalate that up and take it up to a route asset level or a regional level, let's look at it once and let's look at it right and put all the effort into getting it done right once. That means as a portfolio manager, I won't do 50 things duplicated across 50 projects, but with the support of the route asset management team, we'll look at the strategy for that part of the network. We'll look at the constraints that part of the network operates within, and we'll set very clear requirements for the projects that deliver within it. That means a number of those projects will be able to start with a single option already chosen by a more strategic piece of work and enter straight into the design phases of the life cycle. That means we will save time, we will save money. I also believe by looking at it more strategically, we'll make better portfolio decisions that impact ultimately the operational railway. This is the most boring slide. I'm going to skim over this one really quickly. PACE, just as GRIP, is absolutely scalable against our level of complexity assessment. So we use the lock tool, we call it in Network Rail, that looks at the complexity of a project. It goes from a lock 1, which are our major programs and project interventions. It's the TRUs, it's the Thames links, it's the Crossrail type works. They're very complex, very high risk in their nature, all the way through to lock 4s. Lock 4s are the projects we do absolutely day in, night in, every day of the week, every week of the year in Network Rail. They're low risk. We understand them. We understand what can go wrong, and we've got good mitigations in place from our continued learning on them. Those type of projects, because they don't have the level of novelty and external challenge that our lock 1s do, means we can reduce the governance. So what we do within PACE, down through that complexity scale 1 through 4, we reduce the governance burden on PACE based on the project's complexity. So a lock 1 project will require to follow PACE sequentially, the 4 phases. You've still got that flexibility of how you deliver the milestones within them, but you do need to stop at those 4 points, check through a stage gate review, phase readiness review as they're called in PACE, before proceeding. For a lock 4, it's a single review at the end of the life cycle, and what we talk about there is where you haven't got a mandatory review, it's permissible to combine the phases within PACE together and look at, again, is there a better way, if you've not got that governance stop point, to plan, schedule, deliver the work required to move to the next stage. So what does all this mean? What does this mean in terms of applicability? So we'll talk through a few slides now on applicability. This is where I'll use a couple of case studies, and then we'll probably be good to open for some questions. So the first thing to say is, look, we're trying to move away from the over rigor of GRIP, but absolutely appreciate there will always be projects in the portfolio that require that level of rigor and control to effectively manage them. And PACE can be applied if it's the right thing to do, exactly how GRIP was. So the 8 milestones in PACE can be planned sequentially, they can be planned to not overlap, they run in order. And again, that is the most traditional approach to project management. It's why waterfall life cycles were invented in the first place, because it's all about taking small incremental steps to manage scope risk throughout the development, design and delivery stages of the delivery of the investment. What it's not good at is allowing you to make effective trade-offs where you've got other constraints. I think back to the first programme I worked on as part of Network Rail. It was our near £1 billion infrastructure works for the London Olympics. Certainly one of those projects, had we followed GRIP sequentially, had we followed GRIP how it was written and intended, we'd have delivered the asset into operational use somewhere between 12 months and 2 years after the Olympics had left London. The waterfall life cycle didn't allow us to make the right trade-offs to bring that project in on time, which meant we had to look at a different way of operating, a different way of governing that project, which we did. The project was delivered successfully, but we had to go through a lot of governance and review to make sure that was the right thing to do. Under PACE, we're giving the sponsors and their teams the control to make those decisions for themselves where it's the right thing to do, and that's the next examples we will use. So you can quite simply carry on doing the same work we do today, but overlap how we do that. And that's what we'd call in project management a hybrid or overlapping project life cycle. Within the construction industry, if we think about overlapping of design and the construction stages of a project, fast track construction, it's very common, especially on a number of high profile jobs going on around the country, in fact, wider than the country at the moment. What's really important to note on this type of approach, though, where you are doing the same work and overlapping it, absolutely you're going to get a reduced time, but quite often what you'll see is an increased cost, because as you overlap work, you're starting to do work in the next stage or for the next milestone before the outputs required to do that assuredly are not baselined from the previous stage. So there's always the risk of rework. You increase the risk exposure, you increase the cost of because of how you need to manage and mitigate that risk. So it has its pros and it has its cons, this approach. It is, and the first case studies is absolutely how the UK government, however, decided to fund and deliver the development and ultimately production and deployment of the COVID vaccine over the last year. Why did they choose this approach if it's going to reduce time and increase cost? Because sometimes due to the outcome you're trying to achieve, the right way of delivering it will be to follow tried and tested ways of working. So what did they do? How was this developed, and how does this reflect into applying PACE similarly? The diagram you'll see on the left of the screen there is a traditional project life cycle that a vaccine development project will move through. It's got clinical trial authorization, that's equivalent of us receiving a project mandate and baselining a client requirement. It would move through 3 sequential phases of clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2 and 3. They do not overlap. There's stop points between each where you do safety checks and regulatory reviews. At the end of that, it's similar to the end of our development phase. They would have more formal regulatory reviews before going into large-scale production and distribution, which is equivalent to our GRIP 6 and delivery stage. That would take, this is a government slide, it says several years on there, but if you actually look at the data, several years can often mean 5, 10, 15, 20 years to develop a vaccine for something. Quite understandably, in the current context, waiting several years or longer was not the right thing to do. So the government looked at different ways of managing that project life cycle and managing the risk of it effectively. And they adopted the hybrid approach. So they did overlap the phase 1, 2 and 3 clinical trials. They started production before those trials were complete. That is production at risk. If the trials didn't give the right outcome, then some of the production would have been effectively used for not much more than safe disposal on a chemical landfill somewhere. Similar to fast track construction, where we all start building things before we've baseline designs. There's always the risk, if we don't manage it effectively, we're building something that doesn't meet a finalised design requirement later on. And in fact, we've got some examples of that over the years happening absolutely within Network Rail. One of the key enablers for delivering that and delivering it effectively was a move away from point-in-time regulatory and governance controls. They called it rolling regulatory reviews on this slide. In our language, it's progressive assurance. And that's absolutely something we're looking at within PACE, within the wider governance and assurance work that's happening in speed. How do you move away from a framework that has you stop a project and take time to do those reviews? How do you build confidence instead through the life cycle as the work's ongoing? And I think of one extreme example. It is extreme, it's the worst I've ever seen, but it was a digital railway project I was asked to come in and support with some governance and assurance 2 or 3 years ago now, and at one of their formal governance points, which on paper was as simple as move through a GRIP stage gate review, move through an investment decision with the funder, actually just between those 2 reviews had over another 30 governance panels required by Network Rail, wider industry or their stakeholders. That was a process that stopped the project effectively for a period of 6 to 9 months as they moved through approvals. That's not a good use of people's time, it's not a good use of money, and it doesn't deliver effective outcomes when you spend so long doing it. So we ourselves, as part of this move to PACE, we need to move to more progressive assurance. We need to build things confidently and assure them as we move through them. I've highlighted a sentence in green on this slide. It's out of the government document, but it's really important, and I hope it's something we'd agree applies to our industry as well. When you're doing something faster and increasing risk, it's absolutely critical that we don't compromise on the safety, quality and effectiveness of the outcome. That goes for a COVID vaccine that many, if not all of us, will be receiving over the coming weeks and months, and absolutely it goes when you're running a train on the national infrastructure in caring for people's lives, health and well-being in doing so. So how do you manage that risk? The government managed that risk by recognising it up front, recognising they were increasing risk. And the demand to mitigate that risk means the development of the vaccine. And similarly, when you apply this principle to projects, you spend more money because you need more capable and competent resources to manage the risk. And by number, you just need more resources. And I use this example because when a lot of people think of PACE, they think the ability to overlap GRIP stages will solve both parts of the speed problem. It will deliver a quicker project and it will deliver a cheaper project. What I want people to go away recognising is just doing the same work faster, absolutely, will often give you a faster outcome by the nature of overlapping it and doing it faster. But more often than not, it will increase risk and it will increase cost. And cost is a massive part of the speed challenge as well. As Sue mentioned, we work in an industry that has very luckily received heavily support from the government over the years, investment in what we do. We're working for government funding us who truly believe in infrastructure investment, but the pot is finite. Network Rail and the industry's role is to make sure we deliver a portfolio the best possible outcomes for that money. If we can deliver 20 projects instead of 10, we've done our job well. If we deliver 5 projects instead of 10, we've done our job badly. And this is why cost is so important, about making the best use of that money. And I'm going to come on to the last case study now, because this for me is the next step. This is where we really start thinking about how we use the flexibility that Pace wants to put into the industry, and we use it well, not simply doing the same work faster and potentially increasing costs, but thinking radically different about how we move between points in the life cycle, how we deliver work, and how we manage the risk associated with it. So this is a live project. I've left it unnamed because I am making some slightly forward-thinking assumptions, and there may be some commercial sensitivities around it. But this is a project, the current diesel branch line as part of a wider third rail network. There's a requirement to electrify the asset and enter a new electrified asset into service within 2 years. It's a hard time constraint. It's not one that we can easily agree moving with the funder, because the major funder has already agreed to recontract the rolling stock off to a different franchisee within the time frame we've got to deliver. The challenge here is that 2 years to develop, design, enter into service that asset. All our historic data around electrification projects tells us actually it's going to take at least 2 years, if not longer, to achieve just a GRIP 3, just to down select the single option that we then need to design, build and ultimately deliver. So where does that come from? Where do we get to it takes 2 years to do that work? Well, what you'll see on the slide here is how the project team applying GRIP has it written, which is arguably the right way to apply any standard governance and control. So we've got a client requirement come in, it's electrify the asset, and that starts us off into the GRIP life cycle. What we're then told to do through GRIP and the engineering design and technical standards is to look at the options. So the options here are a hybrid train solution, an OLE solution and a third rail solution. The standard says you need to do an option selection at GRIP 3, and that's a risk-based decision. You need to understand the risk of each option, the opportunity of each option, and make an informed decision. What we've got behind that standard in GRIP, though, is a lot of standards that say you do that risk-based decision making by designing. You design each of those options, you increase maturity of each design. Then by the end of GRIP 3, you've got what we call a GRIP 3 design, and that gives you enough information to say what the preferred option is. When I engaged with the team, the development team, we're looking at these 3 options, and absolutely it's 2 years worth of work to go and design each of those and get to an option selection report. So what we've done is encourage them to think differently. So let's not be bounded by you've got to design each of these options out. Surely there's better ways of mitigating or understanding the risk that each option presents, and therefore down selecting differently. So back to the 3 options, and how is that project looking at it now? Firstly, the hybrid train solution can be discounted without the need for that 2 years of design effort to going into it. Because actually, if we take a step back and say, what do we already know about the solution? We know that hybrid trains aren't compatible with that part of the network's wider strategy for electrification and decarbonisation. There's some technical issues why they can't be deployed and run on parts of the main line where they join into. Therefore, we shouldn't need to design it to say it's not possible, because we know based on the facts today that it's not a feasible solution. Instead of spending 2 years designing it to say it's still not feasible, we should be able to do that instead in a number of conversations with the funder and route operator, where we'll jointly agree the right thing is not to continue development of that option. For OLE and third rail, it's much harder. For OLE, absolutely it's the preferred option of the industry regulator, and that's because if you look at electrification safety at a national network level, OLE is a safer asset to deploy than third rail. That said, third rail is the preferred option of the funder and the route operator. There's a number of reasons to support that, not least because it is part of a wider third rail network. They've already got ops maintenance staff who are trained and competent to manage, maintain and renew that type of asset base, and the funder has some preferences which I won't go into as well around that. But again, rather than just jumping into let's spend the next 2 years designing now 2 solutions instead of 3, so we've reduced by a third our effort potentially, is there a better way of understanding the risk associated with OLE and third rail? Again, the standards say you need to design each of them, but that design process is about understanding the risk. It's about making a robust risk-based decision. So what the project team are doing, and it's taken some learning from a smaller project as part of our Merseyrail programme, is they're using a safety-based risk assessment. They're saying, what do we already know about those 2 asset types? So they've gathered all the data that can be attributed to either OLE or third rail, things such as ops and maintenance, staff injury, fatality data, passenger injury data, any other risk data that can be OLE or third rail attributed. They've put that in a business case, initially with rough order of magnitude and then order of magnitude costs, and said, what does the business case look like? Before we go off and do any specific design in this specific location, do we know enough based on data that already exists in the industry now to make this decision? The project I'm talking about with their specific constraints currently working through that process, and it's looking very positive that they'll have a business case that's very strong for one option. The test project that was smaller as part of Merseyrail, when they went through this process, they demonstrated just using as known data within the industry. For them, the third rail option came out of a business case at a disproportion factor of 10. For those of you not familiar with business case language, a disproportion factor of 10 is about as good as you're going to get on a business case. Anything over 3 is very good. 10 is often unheard of. So what does this mean to this project? What does it mean? They've thought differently, they've approached option selection differently to get to their single option a different way. But what does it mean in real tangible terms? It means they're going to achieve an option selection not in 2 years plus, but in 6 to 9 months. And I think it'll be closer to 6 months. It means if we can achieve that in 6 months, we do stand a very high chance of being able to take the single option into design, delivery and enter into service within the 2-year time constraint set by the funder. Really importantly for me, though, it means by down selecting to a single option earlier, without increasing risk to the project, it now means we're going to spend much more time on the single option. We're going to make that as safe as possible. We're going to make it as operationally effective as possible. We're going to look at the construction management and access strategies hand in hand and have more time to work on them together to find the right balance of network disruption through access versus efficiency and cost of construction delivery approach. Ultimately, that means the funder will receive a project which is more efficient in both time and cost. I believe, looking at the data I'm already seeing from the project, that it will be a significantly safer project, as I said, because they are going to have more time on the single option selection. That's the outcome we want. This is really the approach to PACE that we want people to take. At the heart of it, PACE is 2 things. It is the new standard, it's the life cycle we went through, it's the milestones. In and of themselves, they're not going to deliver a benefit to the industry. What's going to deliver a benefit is people using the flexibility that that framework allows them to make. No longer will we tell every project that this is how you move between point A and B, between grip 1 and 2, between PACE phase A and PACE phase B. Our standards today say you move between A and B by getting in a car, and this is how you open the door, and this is how you turn the engine on. In the future, we're going to say, actually, you could get in a car, but you could run, hop, skip, jump. You could jump in a jet plane, you could jump in a boat, or you could windsurf there. Actually, how you move between point A and B should be informed not by myself as a national policy owner. For sure, I'll set some boundaries around it to make sure we get the right outcomes. But it's down to your individual projects. What's specific about your context, stakeholder requirements, geographical, geotechnical constraints, whatever they may be. And then you decide the best way of getting there. What that enables us to do is stop relying on paint by numbers processes that assumes for the thousands of projects in a multi-billion-pound portfolio, there's only one way of working. It allows us to draw much more on the individual and organisational knowledge and experience that we have as an industry, not just our sponsors, project managers and engineers within Network Rail, but also our supply chain. And you'll see in PACE version 1, there's already things where we're stopping mandating Network Rail ways of working and are able to say to the supply chain, what's your value proposition? How would you do this? No longer will we contract you to write a detailed requirements document for us and tell you the format and template that must be in. What we'll do is say we need to understand how you're going to deliver, and to do that we need a detailed requirement. But actually, follow your processes, because the chances are you've got processes that your people are used to working with, they're familiar with, you've got years, if not decades of learning from, that you've deployed across other industries. That's the value we want you to bring to us. So in essence, that's what PACE is at its heart. It's about that mindset change. It's about saying, stop following the process, stop painting by numbers. Instead, we're going to give you a blank canvas, a set of paints, and we're going to use your knowledge and experience to paint a masterpiece at the end of it. I'm going to stop there because I could probably talk for like another hour, and I think I've already talked for too long. So I think we should probably open up for questions.
Thanks very much, Mike. We've got a lot of questions, which is
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So we'll kick off straight away with the most popular.
Yeah.
Which is talking about the embodied knowledge in all of the years of railway project delivery that is within GRIP, lessons learned, etc., when things have gone wrong, and they've been codified into products which have to be delivered during the project life cycle. The question is, as we move away from GRIP, how do we ensure that we don't lose this corporate knowledge, and with our desire for speed, we don't inadvertently repeat mistakes from the past?
But look, there's always going to be a risk, because in simple terms, what we're doing is reducing governance and managing the risk by relying more on the capability and competence of our people and the supply chain. I think I'd push back a little bit on the embedded knowledge in GRIP, because actually what I think, certainly from my experience, has happened in the industry, we realise a risk event, whether that be sadly someone's been injured or killed on the railway, or it's a major financial event like Hendy, and we respond by putting in say, what's the learning to this specific event? So we introduce new standards, new products, new ways of working. What we don't do is integrate them back into the life cycle. So when I inherited GRIP, it was actually not the 63 products you see today, but it was hundreds and hundreds of products. It was half a dozen, if not more, pages of A3 printed out. Yet no one knew why you had to do them, because we never created the learning out of it. What we created was an environment that said, if you fill in this template, you're going to, hopefully this won't happen. I see projects day in, day out that don't know why they're doing the products that GRIP required them to do, but they're doing them anyway. But because they don't understand why they need them, they're not getting the value. It's just a document on a shelf somewhere, unless we use that as real management technique. So this is part of the cultural change we need out of PACE. Look, absolutely, we're going to set some boundaries. We're going to set what a good outcome looks like when you get to a given point in time. We might propose some ways that you could achieve that outcome. We just might not be specific about how you must achieve that outcome. There's some great work going on within the Centre of Excellence and wider Network Rail, actually, that Sue Millington kicked off a couple of years ago around lessons learned and knowledge management. We are getting better at learning from our projects and programmes. What we need to do is stop thinking that a specific risk event needs to just drive a new GRIP product. It's more about how do we create that holistic environment. So within the Centre of Excellence, we run what we call a grey framework. So PACE is the G, it's our governance. Through time, we look at the risk of the portfolio, that's the R. We look at what our assurance is telling us, and based on that risk and assurance information, we say, do we need to undertake any improvement? That's the I in the grey acronym. And that improvement says, okay, what's the learning? What's the learning from the projects and programmes in the portfolio, from our risk and assurance work, and how does that help us improve our governance? A key part of which is improving the capability and knowledge of our people.
So looking to the future, then you'd be treating the users of PACE, respecting their intelligence and making sure they understand why they're doing a thing. GRIP may be the embodiment of corporate knowledge, but that corporate knowledge isn't explicit within GRIP. So is the intention to take the corporate knowledge into the lessons learned arena, so that PACE is slim and simple, and people apply it with intelligence, knowing why they're doing it, and the corporate knowledge is a reference?
Yeah, absolutely. And so lessons learned will support that. Good knowledge management will support that. There's a lot of work going on about how we build that into things like people's professional development. But yeah, what we want in the future, quite simply, is people saying, I'm going to do this thing or not going to do it because, and they understand why it could help them or why they don't need it, which is moving away from the GRIP framework we've got today, which is, especially on smaller projects. In fact, I was with one the other week, a small project. In fact, we had them challenged on the first PACE conference, I think, Dave, when we were with the supply chain. The smaller the project is, the more they mandate GRIP because they don't necessarily understand it. that means we're doing hundreds of things, not because they add tacit value to the project, but just because they're there. We need to create an environment where people understand why they do something or why they don't.
There's a great question here, which I'll be impressed if you can answer, given it's so topical, which is, with the newly announced Great British Railways organisation, will they be engaging on speed and pace as a priority to ensure the momentum doesn't suffer on this important initiative, an opportunity to improve things?
Oh, I'm not allowed to, I don't know what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say, but I haven't read the white paper in its entirety yet, so and I've not had any secret briefings, so I'm sure I can't go far too off brief. I understand that speed is specifically mentioned in the white paper that was published this morning in Great British Railways. Great British Railways is all about bringing back truer accountability to the railways. At the moment, we're in a place where it's easy to hide accountability. It's easy to hide who's to blame. Is it the funder? Is it Network Rail? Is it a TOC? GBR is about giving a single points of accountability, and that will drive improvement. That single point of accountability, however, means we do need to be more transparent, and we do need to be able to demonstrate how we deliver good value. Speed is all about helping us achieve that. So absolutely, as I said, I think speed is mentioned in the white paper. Pace is a critical part of speed. So I think going forward, increasingly, this mindset change and the challenge of process and policy is what will enable establishing Great British Railways as a successful organisation.
I'm sure you're right, because having had a partial read of the paper, I can see that it's very much looking for the kind of efficiencies that speed is trying to deliver. There's a couple of questions from Leslie Lee, which I'm going to try and merge into one. The first one is recognising, that it's good to see that pace seems to be more aligned with Prince 2 as a model, which is being welcomed. And the second one is the more open question, which is suppliers work within the GRIP life cycle and understand the current processes, etc. How will PACE be rolled out to the supply chain to enable them to deliver to the new guidance and process?
So I'm going to suggest there's probably three routes to rolling out. From a business perspective, what they've asked myself to do as the national lead is not to lead engagement and delivery into the regions. They want the regions to own this change and understand the value of it themselves. So at a regional level, both their internal staff and their regional supply chain partners, there's been a senior responsible owner, an SRO appointed from each of the exec teams, and they're leading the charge on briefing and deploying it. And each region will have slightly different plans because of slightly different makeups in their portfolio, therefore differing priorities. That said, although I was asked to keep a little bit hands off, I think after today we're probably up at about 8,000 people now I've briefed since January. So I'm getting out and about, talking to anyone who wants to hear about PACE. More than happy to come along to events like this that RIA have really kindly helped us with today, but also into your individual organisations to provide any briefing, training and workshopping on what PACE means to you. And I think the third route is where you, as certainly as supply chain partners on the call, can be proactive with this as well. You will start seeing the language change within the parts of Network Rail you engage. If you're not seeing the briefings come out effectively, knock on their doors, knock on the project managers' doors, the sponsors' doors you're working with, or indeed the regional directors, and say, actually, look, we're learning about this stuff. We're understanding you're challenging the cost, the time. We think there's things we can do better. Help take us on that journey. It goes the same for the standard challenge that Tom's going to talk about. A critical part of this is engaging in a productive two-way conversation with yourself. So yeah, please reach out to me. You will hear through your regional engagement at some point what that looks like, and I know some regions are quite well ahead with that, but please do equally knock on our door, ask and challenge us, and we'll be happy to engage with you.
So just pick up a very quick question here, which has just appeared. I'm just looking to see if you answered it on your first slide, which is, what are the timescales in getting PACE integrated into the business?
Yeah, so we published version 1 of PACE on the 4th of January. If we followed what I was asked to do by ELT, I'd have also deleted GRIP on the 4th of January and would have said, good luck Network Rail, get on, you're using PACE from today. Now that was the wrong thing to do. We need to go through a change process. So each region is looking at their deployment. Within some regions, we're seeing a lot of projects, certainly all new projects, and a number of their GRIP 1 to 3 projects already running in PACE. They're getting used to it, they're touching it, feeling it, understanding its strengths and weaknesses, which help inform its maturity. At the other end, I've got at least one region who's being more cautious and still looking at what their transition plan is. What I suspect is certainly by the end of this year, GRIP will be deleted. It'll still be there as a legacy framework if we must use it for things, but by that point there'll be a very strong intent from the executive leadership that all projects, certainly all projects that are currently GRIP 4 or earlier, will be running through PACE as their key framework.
Okay, thanks. There's a question, if somebody's asking, is there a single speed contact? And I know the answer to that, so if I could ask my team to paste the speed email into the announcement, that would be great, and we can answer that question straight away. We've got a question here from Caroline Whittam, and it's about in her experience, projects have suffered from being handed from one sponsor to another, which brings inefficiencies and inconsistencies. And there's another question, which is same thing, but about funding. So this is about continuity of sponsors. And there's another question about continuity of funding. You know, funding is being provided for GRIP 1, GRIP 2, GRIP 3, sponsor has been GRIP 1, GRIP 2, GRIP 3. How do we avoid that and get some continuity into the process?
So continuity of sponsorship and leadership is one of my biggest concerns within any project environment. You only have to go to National Audit Office, APMs, whoever's sort of professional organisation that look at project management. They'll all have their top 10 causes of failure for projects, and every single one of them, certainly every single one I've seen, lists changes in sponsorship or senior leadership has a significant impact on project success. So that is something we need to look at how we better mitigate. Part of that, I think, will be through driving better accountability through PACE. There'll be clearer accountability, but also there's a cultural change. We do need to look away at why we do transition sponsors off on some projects so frequently. Sometimes it's the right thing to do. Sometimes you'll bring someone in to initiate a bit of work because they've got the right behaviours to pull a team together, challenge the unknown. Whereas later on you want someone who's more methodical and process driven to deliver. But quite frequently the benefit is having the same person. So we haven't got an answer for how we fix that today, but we're certainly looking at it through some of the work we're doing within PACE around professional development, and certainly in our wider management conversations. In terms of cost and funding, it's a harder one to answer. We are looking at, can we scale the funding decisions through the investment life cycle, and that's I can't comment on the detail of that. It's part of another theme within speed, but I think we do have to appreciate that we're working under HMT guidance, certainly for our England and Wales funded enhancements, and the Treasury's Green Book is a progressive funding model. It says you go through 3 decision points, and all government funded work that requires approval through HMT follows those 3 set points. We're challenging that, saying can we reduce it? For our Oakhampton project, as part of rebuilding your railways, we're moving straight to a final investment decision. But we'll only be able to do that where the funders have confidence in us as an industry. The funding points are there in HMT's guidance for everyone, not just the rail industry, because they need confidence before they invest more money. And they do also represent important points to review and potentially stop investment if it's not the right thing. So that is a longer piece of work. The governance work stream is absolutely challenging and looking at how we do things more effectively. What the answer is and the outcome, I don't know, because it's got to be a good balance of risk management and what drives cost effectiveness.
Thanks. There's a really good follow-on question to that here, Mike, which is from Adam Gordon asking, how will sponsors be trained and supported to make these decisions on flexibility? And then the crunch of it is, what authority will they be given to set aside the demands and preferences of more senior stroke experienced colleagues?
Absolutely. So probably a couple of things to answer on this. In terms of the training and support available, we are currently restructuring the Rail Investment Centre of Excellence. We're going through a consultation process on that at the moment. but we do propose to actually lift professional development as part of the Centre of Excellence's senior team in the future. At the moment, the accountabilities sit for it across different teams. Within my team under Sue, we've got project management. Under Bainey Young, we've got sponsorship. Other parts of the team look after controls, scheduling and all the other core project skills. They're going to be in one team in the new Centre of Excellence. They're going to have a senior leader they report into, whose whole purpose in life is to make sure we're giving effective capability development, good competency development, good training, good career opportunities to our sponsors and project managers. That will strengthen Network Rail's offering. It's going to take time to implement and get right, but we're already doing some really great work. Sue's team are with people like the Infrastructure Projects Authority about what we can learn from wider government learning. They've done some great work around competency development, training interventions that we're now actually piloting within our business across a number of the regions. Second part of the question, what authority will they be given to set aside the demands and preference of more senior experienced colleagues? I think there's two quick things to say on that. There's a cultural shift needed. We're seeing it already within some of our senior leaders that they do need to be less controlling. I've already been engaging with some of our directors that sit on things like investment panels. I was with one a few weeks ago. Projects turn up at investment panel, they say we're not signing this off because you haven't listed X, Y and Z that GRIP demands you do. And the project rightfully challenged and said, we're following pace, we're following the ethos of doing the right thing and not wasting money. The reflection of the senior leaders on that investment panel afterwards was absolutely, we need to change our behaviours, we need to support people and enable them to make the right decisions. And that is a cultural change. It's a really great example in Deloitte's that helped them achieve this. They moved away from output-based performance reviews. So Network Rail, each of us has got to do X, Y and Z by year end and you'll get a good performance rating. Don't do it, you get a bad. In Deloitte's, they don't give those type of outputs anymore, but every time you come off of a project, they write to the client and say, would you give Dave Clark a job who just delivered the project for you? Would you give him a bonus? Would you give him a promotion? Would you employ him as a supplier for you? They ask qualitative questions. They ask questions that drive the project manager not just to deliver an output, to deliver it well, to take accountability for their decisions and to challenge things that they don't agree with, and that's worked exceptionally well. But it is a journey. Those things is not about process change, it's real cultural and behavioural change. Some great work being led as part of Speed with that, and some we're doing explicitly within Pace, and I'm sure we could share some of that at a later date.
That would be good. There's quite a theme in a number of questions about, you might regret choosing the example you chose of sort of the alternatives, hybrid, OLE or third rail. There's a number of questions
I used to use.
There's a number of questions basically questioning how, given that the perception is that the OR have mandated no new third rail, how can third rail be coming through as the solution? Is that the crux of a risk-based standard challenge?
ORR are open to challenge, so although there may be a mandate there or an extremely strong direction of no more third rail, they're not blind to the fact that if there's a safety case there, it may be the right thing to do. The onus is on Network Rail or the proposer to demonstrate that there is a robust safety case and why you would want to do that. And that's why I like this example I used, because they have focused not on what the design looks like and the safety of that design, but the explicit safety case of third rail versus OLE in a specific location. And on the pilot project as part of Merseyrail, that was approved for third rail electrification because the safety case was robust, stood up and demonstrated it was the right thing to do. And that's, again, it's important in Pace. It's not about increasing risk and making quicker decisions. They will deliver the third rail because they demonstrated it was robustly the safest thing to do. And the regulators and funders are open to that type of challenge.
And isn't that what makes that example a really good example of pace and speed generally? Because there's this is an example of where there's an alleged mandated position within the industry, yeah. Whereas, as you've just illustrated, by challenging that apparent mandatory requirement, yeah. It's been demonstrated that the outcome can be delivered in a safe manner.
Absolutely.
So I think actually it's a really good example.
The regulator aren't there to constrain us. They're there to set parameters to work within because it's safe and right to do. And that's what we're challenging. Can we be safer, or can we be just as safe by doing it differently?
Yeah. So the next question is another interesting challenge. It's talking about the iron triangle of program management, the quality, cost, time triangle.
Yeah.
And if you've squeezed the time dimension in PACE, are you confident that the quality and cost axes are not impacted as well?
So I think it'd be wrong to say you're not impacted. What I think the project manager's role to do is to make the right trade-offs between time, cost and quality. I can't think of a single project, maybe one if I strip back donkey's years, that has had such a wide remit and no time and cost constraints that it could always deliver everything in the triad perfectly. As a project manager, you're making balanced decisions every day between trading off on schedule time, on cost, on quality. A decision in one does impact on the other. What we need to do is effectively balance them. I think the thing that enables us to do that without significant impact is that you can work differently. If we'd followed the old ways of working, maybe it's that hybrid approach where you follow GRIP still in terms of how you deliver the processes, but can just do it faster, then your trade-offs are constrained. So you squeeze time a little bit, but suddenly your costs do this. What like the electrification example said, actually they're playing with those constraints. They've pushed the time one, but not pushed the cost one. It's also decreased, and that's I think the challenge is don't skew the triangle too much. How do you do that? Is again, it'll be a different challenge on each project.
I mean, we want the time and cost axes to particularly improve. There may be some acceptable compromise on quality as a result, because there's a question about the allegation of us all too often as an industry gold plating things.
Oh, absolutely. And this is, I mean, we could get into an argument of what we mean by quality, couldn't we? Because there's output quality in terms of is it structurally and operationally safe? That's something absolutely we can never compromise on. But in terms of the gold plating, so more the outcome and benefits type requirements and the quality, it is, I see, in fact, one of my program managers did a bit of analysis for me when she came out of a renewals team years ago of how much money we were spending on some renewals projects by the simple requests of people like asset managers saying, if you've got a bit of money left in your budget, maybe we could have some, I'll use some silly examples, some flowers at the train station that you've just done some work at, or refresh the hanging baskets, or a bit of X, Y, and Z, and it runs into millions of pounds across the business. It's unbelievable. On major projects, it can get even more out of hand. Tim Walden, when we were doing a similar conversation to this morning at another conference, used the term minimum viable product. So actually, we're only paid to deliver the client requirements. We need to challenge ourselves. What's the most effective and efficient way of meeting that requirement? And if we've got scope in there that doesn't meet the requirement, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but we need to have a check where we justify and challenge it. There's a lot of things we do that a lot of things people refer to as gold plating will be around things like stuff that is important around maybe social economic benefits that aren't anything to do with the railway, but will support wider maybe recruitment and employment in a geographic area, might inform our procurement decisions, might increase costs. That may well be the right thing to do. What we need to do is understand why we're doing it and understand if someone's going to receive a tangible benefit that they want to pay for. So I think that's my challenge around scope is, look, we need to stop gold plating, but we just need to challenge ourselves on it's not the minimum, it's not the do least, it's the do the most effective.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, because we're running over time, but there's been such a lot of questions. I want to try and do them justice. So let me just find the one I was looking for. Where's it gone? So there's a couple of might be relatively quick yes/no questions. Yeah. So, does PACE allow for D&B contracts, i.e. combining the project design, project delivery stage? And another sort of quick one is, will the NR mandatory engineering lifecycle process be adjusted to fit into PACE?
First question, procurement and contracts management, PACE nor did GRIP mandate or require anything, and we are challenging our procurement strategies. In fact, I've got the lead for that presenting to an industry advisory board week after next on what the proposals are, because we shouldn't be constrained by certain contract types when we're thinking about how we manage the projects. We need to look at and challenge, and happily feedback as we progress that. Integrated engineering life cycle, my dream, I keep saying it publicly because then we'll have to do it. My dream is to delete the integrated engineering life cycle out of Network Rail's framework, incorporate it into PACE, so moving away from a hierarchical relationship of sponsor, project manager, engineer, put all three roles into one standard, create a tripartite relationship where you're making robust risk-based decisions between the sponsor, between the PM and between the accountable engineer, and I think that will drive much more effective ways of working. And that also touches on some of the other questions here around proceed at haste, repent at leisure. This isn't about proceeding at haste and increasing risk. This is about managing that risk better and more effectively. Integrating better relationships and accountabilities will help us do that. So yeah, engineering lifecycle I'd like to see much more consolidated into PACE. We've made some minor amendments as is.
Thanks, Mike. That's been a really good discussion. We have had 50 odd questions. I think we've dealt with slightly less than half of them. So what we'll try and do, if you'd be so good, Mike, is we'll make a copy of those and ask if you might respond to them at your leisure, and we can send them out with the documentation next week. I've also put in just put out an announcement, which is a survey that Mike would welcome delegates on the call responding to. So we put a survey in the chat. It's a fairly quick thing for you to fill in. So if you wouldn't mind, perhaps you could do it in the break that we're about to have. It just remains for me to thank Mike very much for such a thorough and insightful, knowledgeable discourse on PACE and the clues in the name, I think, for what we're trying to do here. And just to say, we will be back at 2:20 with Tom Chapman for the next part of the workshop, which is going to focus on standards, the standards challenge, and clearly some of the questions like that we've been having are very crossover into that. So Mike, thank you very much. If you can imagine a virtual round of applause, thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, and everybody, we'll be back at 2:20. See you shortly for standards.